And then lastly this morning, we learn from this passage, the bishop must be a husband. Again, we see that in verse 2. Now, if you notice, I have it highlighted up here on the screen, the word must be. A bishop then must be, and it gives these qualifications. Blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, and so on. The phrase must be would apply to all of the qualifications listed in verse 2 and the ones that are given, further given in the rest of this passage. This is not a maybe or possibly, should be. This is a must be. And again, if you've heard the other sermons on this topic, this is something I brought up in a previous sermon. Again, the phrase here, must be, is in the present active tense. And it's not in the past tense, right? He must have been. Again, it's not in the future tense. He should be one day or something like that. It says he must be, present tense. And grammatically, this indicates that all of these qualifications for a man to serve as an elder are maintained, right? He is to have these qualities when he becomes an elder, and during the whole time he serves as an elder, he is to have these qualities. And not only is this what the grammar indicates, I would submit for your consideration, this would just be common sense, wouldn't it? Again, look at verse 2. Imagine a man is a bishop in the church, but he is no longer blameless. He's not a husband. He's not vigilant. He's not sober. He's not of good behavior. He's not a hospitable man. He's not capable of teaching, and so on and so forth. He has none of these qualities anymore. Would we say he should still serve as an elder? Again, common sense would just be, well, no, he's not even serving as an elder because he's not fulfilling these duties that he should have. So again, I would argue not only is this what the grammar indicates, but this should just be common sense for us. These things are meant to be maintained. And again, this phrase must be, it applies equally to everything stated here, including the man's marital status. He must be, the text says, the husband of one wife. And so for a man to serve, the church needs to know, is this man a husband? Right? That's just the basic meaning here. Is he a husband? And then it explains it even further. Well, what kind of husband? Is he the husband of one wife? Number 2. And again, I don't have time to delve too deeply into this, but in a future sermon, I will provide more information on the meaning of that phrase, the husband of one wife, and why it's worded the way it's worded. Suffice to say, elders are married. That's just the basic bottom line of what this is saying. Elders are married men. Bishops, elders, pastors, shepherds, overseers. These are married men according to the Bible. Now, there's a lot of people in the world who don't agree with that. And they want to try and play word games with what it says there in verse 2 so they can have single men serve as pastors. But again, that's not at all what the Bible teaches. It says he must be the husband of one wife. Now, we have all kinds of words which describe men in various situations who are not married. We have the word celibate, which would indicate a man who just doesn't want to get married, usually for religious reasons, but he just wants to be a single man. Again, nothing wrong with that. Again, nothing wrong with any of these things, inherently wrong with any of these things. We have the word bachelor, which again would be a man who's single, who's not opposed to get married, but he's just not married yet. He's single. He's a bachelor. We have the word divorcee, which would describe a man who, for whatever reason, is divorced, whether for good reasons or unscriptural reasons, whatever. He's not married at the time because he's now divorced. He's a divorcee. And we have the term widower, which again would refer to a man who was once married, but his wife has passed on, and therefore he is no longer a married man. Now, these men in these different situations, again, the bottom line is they cannot in their situation say, I am, present tense, the husband of one wife. And so they do not meet the scriptural qualifications to serve. Now, I have never heard anyone in the Church of Christ make the argument that those who are celibate or bachelors or divorcees should serve as elders. Now, nothing surprises me. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a Church of Christ out there somewhere that made that claim, but I personally have never known of a Church of Christ which has said that we should look to celibate and bachelors and divorcees and we should appoint them as elders. However, I have heard members of the church claim men who are currently serving as elders, if in the process of time they become widowers, that they can still serve and they should continue to serve as elders. And respectfully, I disagree with that for the reasons I've shared with you already this morning. Number one, that's not what the grammar indicates. It says he must be, present tense, the husband of one wife. And then also, again, a widower is not a married man. He is in the same category as these other single men. Okay, let me ask you two questions, which I believe are just common sense questions. Does the church have widowers become elders? And then number two, is it wrong for a widower to date? Right? To date, we might say maybe something a little bit more polite or old-fashioned, maybe court a woman, right, with the possibility of getting married. Would that be wrong? Would that be sinful for a man to do that? And I suggest to you the answer to both of these questions is no. Again, I do not know of any church which would look to a group of widowers within the church and say, we ought to consider them for the eldership. Okay, well, why is that? Well, again, the simple fact is they're not married men. That's why. They're not the husband of one wife. And again, you can't have it both ways. You can't believe that only married men can become elders, but then when they're not married, they can continue. That's inconsistent. It has to be either one way or the other. And both Jesus' teachings and Paul's teachings inform us that a marriage ends when a spouse passes on. We're not going to read Luke 20 for time's sake, but I encourage you to jot down those references if you're taking notes. Luke 20, verses 29 through 36, and then 1 Corinthians 7:39, and we will read that one. But Jesus teaches plainly that when we pass on from this world, marriage is not part of our existence in the hereafter. And, one of the ways we can know the truth is by comparing different beliefs. There are people in the religious world, by the way, who believe that when you die, you're still married. And even, when you go into heaven or wherever, you still have children. And again, that's not at all what the Bible teaches. And Jesus teaches marriage is not part of the hereafter. It's not part of the resurrection. And again, I'd say 1 Corinthians 7, if, someone might say, well, Luke 20 is a little ambiguous. Well, if you look at 1 Corinthians 7, verse 39, it's crystal clear. I mean, there's no wiggle room there. The Bible teaches a widow or widower, since someone who's been bereft of their spouse, they can get married again with God's blessing. And here I have the English Standard Version because I think it's a little clearer here than the King James. And notice it says here, a wife is bound to her husband how long? For eternity? For all of time in heaven? No, it says as long as he lives. And here bond is referring to the marriage bond. So they are married as the traditional vows go till death do its part. Those are not empty or hollow words. That's exactly what the Bible teaches. Again, as long as he lives, she's bound to her husband as long as he lives. And then notice here, but if her husband dies, again, what's it say? She can never get married again? And if she gets married again, that's a sinful, wicked situation and, something like that? No, not at all. It says, if her husband dies, she is free to be married to whom she wishes, only in the Lord. So again, the Bible's very clear that if your spouse passes on and you are now a single man, a single woman, if you want to, right, you don't have to, but if you would want to, you could get married again with God's approval. And so again, that second question, would it be wrong for a widower to date or court a woman, especially with the intention of marrying her? Well, clearly not, right? Now, again, I'm kind of emphasizing this more than I typically would, because I have heard some people claim that a widower is a married man, that he still is married. And, well, that contradicts what this verse teaches. It contradicts what Jesus teaches. And I understand, I can sympathize if your spouse passes on. Of course, you're still going to love them. You're going to have feelings in your heart of, I'm still married or I'm still connected to this person. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying when it comes to reality and your current situation in this life, the Bible teaches your marriage ends when your spouse passes on. And again, you can't have it both ways. Either it ends when they pass on or it doesn't. And we need to have conversations with widows and widowers who have remarried and tell them they're not right. So again, it has to be one way or the other. And again, I would say the Bible is crystal clear on this, that, again, your marriage lasts as long as your spouse lives, and then when your spouse passes on, if you would want to, you're at liberty to get married again in the Lord, as it says. The wife of each elder is an essential part of the eldership. And I want to repeat that because I think it's something that maybe we don't emphasize, and certainly it's not something that's emphasized in the religious world at large, where people are having pastors and bishops who are not married at all. The wife of each elder is an essential part of the eldership. Now, that doesn't mean they're like female elders or they should be, kind of puppeteering their husbands or anything like that. But God has made this a qualification, right? Because the wife is going to be there as the partner, as the helpmeet, to be that shoulder to lean on when her husband, if he's serving as an elder, when he's going through certain situations in the church and he might want to talk to her and get her advice and so on. The wife of each elder is an essential part of the eldership. And if we ignore this principle, then we are no different than denominations which appoint single men to serve as pastors and elders. And again, when we look at Scripture, it plainly teaches the marital status of a bishop is not optional. Again, the New Testament says he must be the husband of one wife. And again, that's just one of the many qualifications. Again, it says he's to be blameless. And again, from the get-go, he ought to have that desire to become an elder, that desire to do the work of an elder. It is my hope that we can learn and grow in our knowledge of God's Word. And so when the time comes that we can appoint men to serve as elders here at the Chestnut Mountain Church of Christ, men who are going to first and foremost be pleasing to God, and men who are going to benefit this congregation. May we learn so we can grow and be faithful in all things, faithful in our personal walk with God, and also faithful as a church.